Good evening to one and all present here for this webinar. Hope all of you are safe at home, spending your time usefully. And this is actually an unprecedented situation for every one of us. Not only for us, but all the people in the world. And this COVID-19, that is the coronavirus 19, has shuttered the economy, and it has battered the higher education also, because we the teachers have to switch over from the face-to-face instruction which we had been practicing all along to the remote instruction, that is through this online method of teaching, like several apps, Google Classroom, Meet, or Zoom, or any other method. And therefore, this is actually a method which is resorted to out of compulsion. And NAAC, National Assessment and Accreditation Council, time and again has been insisting on the ICT based teaching only. And indirectly now every institution has been forced to adopt the ICT, web based teaching. And therefore, there is going to be a sea change in the method of teaching, method of learning by the students, method of assessment, and method of even feedback and follow-up. And therefore, we have to orient the teaching staff, the students, everybody in this new method of teaching. And most of the institutions have already experienced, because they are privileged. For example, institutions located in cities, urban areas, they are much privileged, and because of their preparedness, they have already started teaching their students. But institutions which are located in remote areas, like Idea College, which is situated in the remote part of this country, is also resorting to this method. So it is a welcome step, and I hope all the teachers would make use of this exercise. And I wish that every one of you benefit by this webinar. So I congratulate the Idea College, the management, the principal, vice principal, and the head of the department, Dr. Vijayalakshmi, with the head of the Department of Commerce, Dr. Vijayalakshmi, and all the faculty members for arranging this faculty development program for a period of 5 days, and that too help the institutions face NAAC assessment and accreditation. And most of you will be knowing that it is a chain action. For example, a college, whether 5 years old or 10 years old, if it is an unaided college, self-financing college, first it will be affiliated to the university, it will be permitted by the government, and it will be affiliated to a particular university. So they will give temporary affiliation. So first step. Afterwards, after 3 years or 5 years, they will go for the permanent affiliation. But now permanent affiliation is not given by the universities all of a sudden. First, they ask the colleges to apply for recognition under 2F and 12B of the University Grants Commission Act. So the colleges are to be recognized under 2F and 12B. 2F recognition is basic, that is, the college is recognized by the university as a recognized institution to impart education to the students. Recognition under 12B permits an institution to apply for financial grants. Therefore, now the institutions have to apply for 2F and 12B status recognition under the UGC Act. After getting this recognition only, they can apply for permanent affiliation. Even before that, they have to go for NAAC, assessment and accreditation. After obtaining NAAC assessment and accreditation only, the institutions are now permitted to apply to the concerned universities for permanent affiliation. And therefore, this is the step-by-step procedure for the institutions. Now, why I am listing out this procedure is that there is now an imperative need on the part of every institution, every teacher, to foster the quality of education in their institution. Fostering the quality of education is higher education, particularly in the colleges and universities, is critical today for several reasons. One is for effective participation of young people in the knowledge production. So far, I will be discussing in the lecture also. So far, we were confined to teacher-centric methods. But now we want the students to participate fully in the knowledge production. And second one is participation in the knowledge economy. Today's economy is knowledge economy. Even it is there are knowledge industries, there are knowledge wars even, and therefore it is not simply industry which specializes in manufacture of goods only. IT industry is a knowledge industry. So knowledge-based economy, knowledge-based industry, knowledge-based wars. So knowledge economy is the order of the day. We have to develop, create students who would participate in the knowledge economy. And third one is we have to improve the national competencies of our students in the globalized world. Now we are preparing our students to face the global competition, not the national competition or regional competition. NAAC insists that how many students you have from other states, from other countries. Similarly, how many teachers you have in your institution from other states, from other countries. And therefore, there should be a heterogeneous group of the students. There should be a heterogeneous group of teachers so that knowledge sharing becomes possible. So, we have to improve the national competencies in the globalized world, and we have to equip the students with relevant skills. Here comes my topic, namely outcome-based education. You have to equip the students with the skills. So, for these purposes, we need to foster the quality of education, quality of higher education. Now, what is quality? In simple terminology, quality means, to just remember these 5 or 6 letters rather. EPS, that is excellence. Quality means excellence. Quality means perfection. Quality means standards. Quality means the value for money. Then quality means consistency. So all these things put together is called the quality. Now, quality of higher education, what it is meant for, why we should enhance the quality of higher education, or what is going to be the result of this higher quality of education. Now, this, when you increase or when you enhance the quality of higher education, definitely it would produce people with functional and social relevance. Because today, functional relevance is there, social relevance is not there much with our students. So if you analyze it carefully, we have to create both, we have to create people or students or citizens of tomorrow with functional relevance. That is the specialization in the concerned discipline, number one. Then social relevance. What is social relevance? They must assist the society which has provided them this higher education. I recall the words of Swami Vivekananda. Swami Vivekananda said that if you get the opportunity to be educated, it means that you are denying the opportunities to others. For example, I applied to an institution for admission. Out of 100 people, I am getting admission. 1,000 people have applied, only 10 seats. So I am getting admission. If I am getting admission out of 1,000, out of 10 seats, then I am given the admission, but 99 people are denied the opportunities. And therefore, when other people are denied the opportunity, when I am given the opportunity, then I should make use of this opportunity. Not only that, I should help the society. I should return to the society out of the education which I got from the education, higher education. Therefore, social relevance. So this is the number one. Number two, when you get to the higher education, either in colleges or in universities, you must really enhance your mental ability. Some people call it as intelligence, or you call it in any way you like. Mental ability should be enhanced, and then we must also enhance the physical dexterity. Physical dexterity. Again, if you go to Rameshwaram, you can see in the temple at the entrance it is written. Again, Swami Vivekananda's words only. You must have purity of body and purity of mind. உடல் தூய்மையும் உள்ள தூய்மையும் வேண்டும். So, as Swami Vivekananda rightly pointed out, we must have purity of mind, purity of body. So, for purity of mind, we must have purity of body. We must have a physical dexterity, because this is a very crucial period. So, every one of us has to take care of our physical body, health condition, and absence of any illness, or absence of even proneness to illness. It is not necessary. It is not enough that if you are not having any disease, but you must also be having the absence, or you must not be prone to any disease, contact any disease. Therefore, physical dexterity. And then third one is the efficacy and reliability. Because today's society needs people who are efficient, people who are reliable. This reliability is now very important, and higher education has to provide this to our students. And then the students who get benefit out of this higher education must exercise initiative. If a country is prospering, or if an institution is prospering, first thing, it is because of the head of the institution, or it is because of the head of the state, or head of the government. And therefore, today you can see many newspapers are talking about, or have given the information about possible Chinese intrusion into the Indian border in the northern side of the Ladakh. Earlier in 2018 also, we had a similar such attempted intrusion by China. But because of the strong leadership today we have, many countries have extended their support. So, what is needed is the beyond this physical dexterity or mental ability or efficacy and reliability, one must exercise greater initiative. So, the head of the institution or head of the state, if he or she exercises initiative, then definitely he can lead the entire group towards achieving the target. And we must help our students make innovations, undertake experiments. This is the need of the hour today. Every institution has got today innovation club or incubation club. We must enable our students to make innovation. This is quite popular and prevalent in foreign countries, in foreign universities. But in our country, in colleges, we need to have an incubation club, innovation club, particularly with the science students and also with arts and management students. So, if we have this, we help our students to undertake experiments and make innovations. Definitely, we are not only helping them directly, we are helping our institutions, we are helping our country as a whole. So, these are the results of high quality or higher quality of higher education. And what we must do here in this context, I am here to discuss about the outcome-based education. That is the topic. Why we should discuss about this particular outcome-based education? Earlier, In those days, some 20 years or 30 years back, we had objective-based education. Every teacher training college or every school or every college will be teaching the students based on the objectives. You could have seen there are two types of teaching, even people will say. One is, two types of approaches. One is the surface approach, the other one is the deep approach. How do we distinguish between this surface approach and deep approach? This is all based on the objectives. You know, there is a hierarchy which is called the Bloom's taxonomy of instructional objectives: knowledge, understanding, application, skill, interest, attitude, etc. But the main are four. First one is knowledge, acquisition of knowledge. Second one is development of understanding, comprehension, development of understanding. Third one is development of knowledge, understand, development of skill. Then fourth one is development of interest. So knowledge, understanding, application. Third one is apply the knowledge that you have already acquired. First one, we must enable the student to acquire knowledge. Second, we must help the student to develop the understanding. And third one, we must enable the students to apply the knowledge already acquired. And finally, we must help the students to develop their skill. So if these four objectives, knowledge, understanding, application, skill, are followed in our teaching in those days, it is enough. This knowledge and understanding, the first two are lower order level objectives, and application and skill are higher order objectives. And once you proceed in this order or hierarchy, knowledge, understanding, application, skill, the last two which I mentioned, namely developing the right positive attitude and developing interest in our students, becomes easier. So you have to follow these objectives either both in teaching and in testing, that is assessment also. When a teacher enters the classroom, all of a sudden he cannot or she cannot start today's class. I'm going to talk like this, what I told you now. Today I'm going to talk to you on this particular topic. All of a sudden we cannot start. What we must do? We must enable the student to recall the previous knowledge, what he studied in the earlier classes. And we must take the lead from the previous class. That is called recalling, recognizing. This comes under the knowledge part. So you take the lead from the previous class and then you start that day's lesson. Then you provide more and more explanation to develop their understanding. This is objective-based teaching. And we were teaching all along. It was producing good results. But time and again, there has been a criticism about our higher education. What is the criticism? There is a strong, there is a wide gap between the supply and demand. That is, the qualification or the quality of the graduates who are coming out of these institutions and the requirement or the demand of the industry, the demand of the employers. There is a wide gap. And to bridge this gap only, today, emphasis is laid on outcome-based education. Now, what is outcome-based education? Now, if you just look at the visual, then you can see outcome-based education . What is actually the outcome-based education? Now, they are the reference points. Outcomes are the reference points which help us formulate graduate attributes. Now, you must be familiar with this terminology, graduate attribute. Graduate attribute is nothing but the program outcome. Program. Now, for the easy understanding, I would like to tell you that so far what we called as course will be called program. For example, in those days, BA was a course, BSc was a course, BCom was a course. Now they will be no longer called as course; they are called programs. And the individual papers are subjects which we teach. For example, English as a subject is a course. Tamil as a language subject is a course. So there are program outcomes, program objective, or program educational objective, programs expected outcome, and course objective, course outcome. So these terminologies you must be familiar. This program outcome is called graduate attribute. What is attribute? Attribute means a quality. What is expected of a graduate when he passes out of his institution? He or she passes out of the institution. That is called the graduate attribute. For easy understanding, we also call it as program outcome. Then second one is the qualification descriptors. Learning outcomes help us to formulate the qualification descriptor. What is qualification descriptor? It is only the generic outcome of the expected outcome. So generic outcomes and attributes expected, that is called the qualification descriptor. We give different descriptors. Then third one is the program learning outcome. Fourth one is course learning outcome. All these are possible to be formulated or designed with the help of this learning outcomes. Now, they help us in guiding to articulate the essential learnings associated with the programs of study. What is expected, what the students should study in their courses, individual courses, is very clearly explained by the learning outcomes. Now, what is for which we need to design the curriculum? Let me start from the curriculum and end with assessment. Because we need to design the curriculum suitable for the industry, suitable for the employer, suitable for their living in future. You might be aware there are four types. There were four types of learning. Even today we practice them. First one is learning to know. Second one, learning to do. Third one, learning to live. And fourth one is learning to be. I repeat, learning to know. Just for knowledge's sake, I learn. This is learning to know. Second one, learning to do. Not only for knowledge's sake, I must also be able to do the work. So maybe a technical education or lab-based experiment, anything. Learning to do. And third one is the learning to live. It gives me a skill with which I am able to do my livelihood. So living. And fourth one, learning to be. This is actually the attribute which is meant for the society, which is meant for our social well-being. Because I must help the society in return for the higher education I have obtained from the institution. So these four things are practiced in their order. Now, first we have to design the curriculum. Now, this outcome-based curriculum is intended to allow flexibility and innovation. Please take note of these two words, flexibility and innovation. Today, in the present system, every institution which is not autonomous body lacks this flexibility and innovation in their curriculum. Hope all of you will agree. Only those institutions which are autonomous or the university departments, they have the full autonomy to ensure flexibility and innovation. Now, the National Education Policy 2019, which the government has got it approved from Parliament, ensures this flexibility and innovation in the curriculum. How? Hereafter, every institution will become autonomous. Affiliation system will not be there. Every institution is independent. So they can design their own curriculum. They can offer the curriculum through the right method of teaching, and they can conduct the assessment, and they can have the feedback or follow-up. With the result, it is possible for the institution to give outcome-based education. So flexibility shall be there. This is the first advantage which I consider, or even foremost advantage: flexibility and innovation in program and design and syllabi development by the higher education institution. Second one, teaching learning process. So there shall be flexibility and innovation in teaching learning process. Third one, assessment of the students. Fourth one, I told you, feedback or program review. Periodically, we must review the program. If needed, we must revise the program, either partially or fully. Of course, within the broad framework. What is that broad framework? There will be some regulatory mechanism in order to ensure uniformity. So, within a broad framework of agreed expected graduate attributes, qualification descriptor, program learning outcome. So, the outcome-based education helps in flexibility and innovation in curriculum designing, teaching learning, assessment of the students' learning level, and periodic programming. Next one, traditional methods of teaching. Most of us are now practicing. It is a teacher-centric method because we resort to lectures and demonstration method sometimes in science. It is curriculum-centered. It is a formal, this method of teaching, traditional teaching. And in traditional teaching also, we were helping the students to acquire knowledge, to acquire skill. But what is the ultimate use? That you must understand. Whether the students have really benefited out of this knowledge. I tell you, there is nothing wrong if I give this information because it has been given in the parliament itself. Most of the students are not employable today. The degree varies in arts and science colleges and engineering colleges. So what happens ultimately? The same students who have undergone 3 years or 4 years rigorous training in colleges, when they go to the, even the bright students, when they are selected by the industry, they are not fit into the industry. They don't fit into the industry all of a sudden. So they are inducted into the job only after training. Training means okay, every institution will give training. But now the leading companies are again re-educating the students in the similar area in which they have got their degrees. So what does it show? The learner finds that there is a gap between what is demanded by the industry and what is given at present by the institution. So that is why I have mentioned here, they are not coupled to a specific context. They have the knowledge, they have the skill, but is it coupled to the specific context? No. And the learning takes place in a vacuum. Teacher also could not do anything because syllabus is there, the teacher is confined to the syllabus, curriculum is there, the teacher is confined to the curriculum. So he or she finishes the curriculum. Okay, her part, his part is over. Student, he learns the subjects taught. He writes the examination. He passes out in the examination. He gets the degree. So both have done their job excellently. But whether it is relevant to the context, whether it is coupled with the context, and what it must do is, we must do is that it must belong to the input part of the learning. That is curriculum. So this is the lacuna that we find in the traditional system. Deficiencies, really structured curriculum. Can a college, take for example, Hidaya College for women, can it introduce any innovation, any flexibility in their syllabi taught to the students? unless the university changes it. And the universities will change it once in 2 years or once in 3 years. Otherwise, colleges have no say at all. That is now sought to be modified in the national education policy. Second, emphasis on academic education, which resulted in the development of skills being neglected. Earlier, we focused much on knowledge part only, and we did not consider much about the skills part. That is why people criticize the present system as inflexible and prescriptive curriculum. It is prescribed. You follow that. You are not supposed to deviate from the curriculum. And it is norm referenced. What is norm referenced? Very strict norms are given. 5 units. And questions shall be set from the 5 units only. And objective type questions, paragraph type questions, essay type questions. So this is a norm. Every teacher has to set the questions like this only. And this is resulted in excessive competition also. Then there is a gap between formal education and training that I mentioned in the beginning itself. There is a gap between the two. And the testing of learner achievement in terms of symbols or marks. Now, this is another point. Of course, we have introduced many modifications in this part. That is, we have introduced the grade. Even we don't mention F. If a student fails in a particular course, we don't mention it as F. Earlier we mentioned it as F. Now it is called RA. RA means reappearance. Because again, this was out of a high court case where the court ordered that the students sometimes go to the extreme step of committing suicide when they see in their mark sheets or grade sheets as fail. So it has been changed as RA, reappearance. So the testing of learner achievement in terms of symbols or marks, etc., it does not really reflect the learner's performance. And next one is emphasis was on differentiation in the form of broad variety of subjects. So science student, arts student, even among the science students, the different categories of science. And today you could see a sort of interdisciplinary approach or a sort of multidisciplinary approach has come to stay. But in the traditional education, it was a teacher-centered, it was not learner-centered, and content-based curriculum. And whatever the teacher has taught, the students used to learn through rote memory sometimes. Rote memory means memorizing. There is nothing wrong. We have to memorize certain things. But if everything is memorized, then the students are put to hardships when they go out of the campuses. Because you could see many students who have passed out the +2 with very good marks are unable to cope with the environment in the engineering or medical colleges or any other professional colleges, for the simple reason that it was mostly content-based curriculum and the students resorted to rote memory, that is learning by heart. There was not much collaboration, and there was no much group learning. Moreover, there was not much correlation between the objectives, activities, and assessments. This I told you in the beginning that in objective-based teaching, right from the teaching planning, ending with assessment, everything should revolve around objectives only. But sometimes there will be improper alignment in the traditional method of teaching. Soft skills were not at all considered in the traditional methods of teaching. Whereas I am going to tell you in the graduate attributes, several soft skills are now emphasized because this is the demand of the employer. This is the demand of the industry today, like communication skill, interpersonal skill, analytical skill, working attitude, etc. So these are all various soft skills. Now, outcome-based education it yes, workforce. Outcome-based education requires the workforce who can solve the problems. Outcome-based education intends to create workforce who can solve the problems, who is committed to ongoing learning. You can see in many professional examinations, even in the universities, colleges also, we give case studies or problem-based questions, etc. Now, what is the intention here? The student must be able to analytically think, use his critical thinking or analytical thinking capacity, and come out with solutions. So, they must be able to solve the problems. They must be committed to ongoing learning. They must be creative. They must possess average communication skill. That is what is insisted, not that very high communication skill. Because as I used to tell everywhere, we are not teachers, or we are not teachers of English, or we are not native speakers of English. We are only making use of English. We are users of English. If I am teaching commerce through English, I am using English to teach commerce. That's all. Therefore, average communication skill is needed, and it must be in line with the new technological development. This is the deficiency of many of our teachers. Suppose I would have studied some 40 years back. I did my PG in 1978, finished my postgraduate degree in 80. Now 40 years are over. Technology has changed a lot. Now I must constantly update myself, constantly orient myself with the improvement or development of technology also. Otherwise, I become obsolete. I become outmoded in my own field, teaching. So teachers must always come out with initiative and enterprising quality to update themselves. And the workforce must be flexible. What is flexibility? See, given all the knowledge, skill, etc., you must be able to adjust to the environment. Many leaders today have become successful not because of their intelligence, but because of their adaptability to the situation, adjustability to the environment. So that is flexibility. And the workforce whom we are going to produce out of this after this outcome-based education, they must be able to participate in the management process and decision making. Involve the students in decision making. NAAC is asking one question: whether there is democratic way of functioning in your institution, in your college or university. We say yes, because we have got several bodies in which not only the management representatives, not only the teacher representatives, student representatives are also there. So they also contribute, and they are also given training to take decisions. And finally, they must be able to work interactively, team spirit, teamwork. We must enable the students to acquire this skill of working in a team, because working together is always a progress. What is outcome-based education? It is a comprehensive approach to organizing and operating a curriculum which is focused and defined by successful demonstrations. In other words, what is essential for the learners? Now, I would like to stress this particular point. In outcome-based education, we must consider what is essential for all the learners to be able to do successfully at the end of their learning experience. Suppose a student finishes his BCom or MCom, whether he will be suitable for the industry, whether he will be suitable for the accounts department of the industry, for which we must identify the requirements of the industry on the one side And on the other side, we must have designed the curriculum, we must have taught our student, we must assess the student, and we must review the program successfully on this basis. And ultimately, it implies emerging with the idea of what is important for the learners to be able to do. What is important for the learners to be able to do? Don't teach what you know. Don't teach what the authorities have insisted, or don't teach what the management says. Teach what the learner requires. Then how shall we ascertain the requirement of the learner? Involve the learner, involve the industry, involve the employer in the curriculum designing. Then you will understand what is the requirement or what the learner should possess after finishing this particular program. So it is a continuous process. As I told you earlier, what are the requirements? First, develop a clear set of outcomes. First, develop a clear set of outcomes and organize into the system's subjects. Second one is establish conditions and opportunities within the system. Why? In order to enable and encourage the learners to achieve these outcomes. So two things are important. First, develop the set of outcomes and incorporate it in the subjects. Second one, establish conditions and opportunities. What is the condition? What is the opportunity? Through your teaching learning methods, through your assessment, establish the conditions. I tell you a simple example. Of course, this is confidential, but nothing wrong in sharing with the teachers. I was an examiner for several years for professional bodies in Delhi. I don't want to mention the name. And there is a sea of difference between their curriculum, their methods of teaching and learning, their assessment, etc. And they are remunerating the teachers also. I was there for about 10 years, but after I became controller and registrar of the university, I could not continue that work. Therefore, I had to give up that work. I could find a sea of difference in the assessment procedure. There, not only the questions were analytical, unless the student understands the subject and attempts the question, writes the answer, he or she won't get the marks at all. But here in our system, if the student has simply written something, we give sometimes points. Now that should not be there. We must establish very strict conditions and opportunities within the system. Why? Why we must incorporate or insist strict conditions? Not for our sake, to enable and encourage the learners. Why students from IIT, IIS, etc., they get immediate employment, IIM, etc., they get immediate employment? It is because they also have the clear set of outcomes, but their conditions are very stringent. The opportunities are plenty. Conditions are stringent. So they are made to follow the conditions very strictly. That is why their learning outcome is good. They are able to achieve the learning outcome and they get immediate employment. Then you could see a comparison. Comparison of the traditional method and the outcome-based education. In the traditional method, learners are passive. Here, active. How, sir? How they are passive and active? Because I told you, in traditional method, it is a curriculum-centered, it is teacher-centered. Whereas in OBE, students have to be involved. It is not simply the teacher delivering a lecture for the whole of the classroom. The students have to be interactive. The student have to solve the problem. The students have to understand the problem. Conditions are very strict. Unless they understand the problem or understand the case and then solve it properly, they won't get marks. So they are active. the traditional method, it was examination driven, but here ongoing basis. Even now we have this CIA, continuous internal assessment. What is continuous internal assessment? Even in the present CBCS, choice-based credit system, we have this continuous internal assessment. Many universities in North India, they did not have the semester pattern for long. They introduced it very late. And many universities, many colleges in the North, again, they did not have this CBCS, choice-based credit system. Whereas in Tamil Nadu, we are far ahead. I must happily acknowledge that Tamil Nadu is forging ahead of all other states in India as far as higher education is concerned. This is not to praise anybody, but I will give you the concrete evidences. Because time and again our higher education minister is telling that our gross enrollment ratio is 43% or so, whereas national average is only 29% or so. That is one thing, okay. But Tamil Nadu is the state which introduced the choice-based credit system in 2009 itself in its colleges. Whereas in North India, many states did not introduce this CBCS. Even I had visited Madhya Pradesh in one university. I was invited as a speaker there for a seminar. I spoke on choice-based credit system in 2012. They did not introduce at that time. In 2012 only, they were discussing whether to introduce. And I told them, in Tamil Nadu we have introduced, but still we are in the experiment stage only because we have to implement it fully. There is only partial implementation today because we have the operational difficulties, operational problems. Then rote learning is encouraged in the traditional method, but here critical thinking, reasoning, reflection, and action, they are also encouraged. Please remember that we have to encourage critical thinking of our students in our educational campuses. Universities and higher education colleges are the places where critical thinking should be developed. Reasoning should be developed. Students are given opportunity to reflect. And traditional method, syllabus is content-based, divided into subject. Here, content is integrated, learning is real, connected to real-life situation. In those days, we, the commerce students, used to have this real-life situation only in law papers. We had one paper called mercantile law. When I was a student, it was called mercantile law. Now it is called commercial law. There only actual case laws will be given. High Court case laws, Supreme Court case laws will be given. And the verdict also will be given. This is the real life. But in all other subjects, as far as example management is concerned or commerce is concerned, most of the questions revolve around the theoretical questions only and not the case-based one. And learning is a textbook or worksheet bound. Here it is learning centered, learner centered. Teacher finds the syllabus as rigid, not negotiable. Teacher cannot do anything. He has to teach, complete the syllabus within the prescribed time. Whereas in the OBE, learning programs are seen as guides. And teachers become innovative. Teachers become creative in designing the program. Now, the present situation has indirectly forced the teachers, all the teachers of all the institutions, to be flexible, to become innovative and creative in the teaching learning method also. But this teaching learning alone is not enough to be modified. The modifications should start from the curriculum designing itself. Hope all the universities will introduce the necessary modifications in the curriculum itself. So start with the curriculum, then introduce the modification, the teaching learning, assessment, and then review. In the traditional method, teachers are responsible for learning and motivation depends on personality of the teacher. That is the old system. If the teacher is effective, then the students develop interest. Otherwise, the students do not show much interest. But here, it is a responsibility of the learner for their own learning. Why? In outcome-based education, unless they realize the expected outcome, unless they reach the expected outcome, then they are nowhere in the job market. What is the focus of the OBE? It addresses the following key questions. What do we want the students to be able to do so? To be able to do at the end of the program, what we want them to do? How can we help our students to achieve it? And how do we know that they have achieved it? And how do we close the loop for further improvement? So, if you answer these 4 questions, then we have achieved OBE in our campus. So, what do you want your students to become? Or what do you want your students to do? And how you can help them to achieve it? And how to know that they have achieved it? Assessment. Second one is method. First one is curriculum. Second question deals with method of teaching, learning. Third one deals with assessment. And fourth one is review. So this review also is meant for continuous quality improvement. In other words, the Japanese terminology is Kaizen, K-A-I-Z-E-N, Kaizen. Kaizen means continuous improvement. That is why Maruti Udyog, when it was in collaboration with the Japanese Suzuki Motor Corporation, SMC, it introduced one variety called Zen in Maruti. Z-E-N, Zen. Zen word came from Kaizen, K-A-I-Z-E-N, which means continuous improvement. Japanese terminology. Now, when you introduce OBE, when you implement OBE, outcome-based education in your institution, what benefits you will get? More directed and coherent curriculum. So the curriculum becomes coherent, curriculum becomes relevant, and graduates will become more relevant to industry and other stakeholders. Many of you might be aware of the fact that in city colleges like Madurai, Trichy, Coimbatore, Chennai, etc., in many city colleges, the professional bodies have cooperated with the colleges and they have introduced degree programs. For example, BCom professional accounting. How does it differ from the conventional degree, BCom degree? It is because once a student passes out this BCom professional accounting, he finds it very easy to join the CA, Chartered Accountancy program, because almost the same syllabi, almost the same method of teaching learning, almost the same method of assessment. So this is the tie-up between the industry or the institute and the autonomous institutions. So graduates will become relevant, continuous improvement will be there, and OBE shifts from measuring input and process to include measuring output. So far, we were very much bothered to complete the syllabi input. Now, we have to bother about the output. Why the PPT is not graduate attributes? I told you program outcomes. They reflect the qualities and abilities of the individual learner. The list of graduate attributes I am giving a little later, but knowledge, application of knowledge, professional skill, etc., they all constitute what is called the graduate attribute. So they are simply the characteristics of the learners and set of the competencies. Remember, the last sentence counts very much, which are beyond the study of a particular program. It is not enough if the students are able to learn from the subject that is taught. They must also go beyond the horizon. So that is called the learning outcome. Program outcome are the graduate attributes: disciplinary knowledge and understanding, generic skill, including the global competencies. For example, if many Indian students are able to shine in abroad, in foreign countries, particularly in United States of America or in any other country, it is because of their disciplinary knowledge and understanding, generic skill. Now, what is this generic skill? See, you could have seen many graduates who simply possessed the certificates as graduates, they could not compete. Those who possess the generic skills, including the competency that is required, irrespective of the qualification which you possess. You may be a BE graduate, but if you do not possess the generic skill, if you do not possess the global competency which is demanded, then there is no use in possessing BE. Whereas a simple BSc graduate might possess that generic skill. So, graduate attributes reflect beyond the syllabus, beyond the curriculum. And how the OBE is fostered. I mean, graduate attributes are fostered or developed. Meaningful learning experiences. And the total experience in the campus with critical and reflective thinking. So, curriculum should be current, and the experience in the university or college should be good. And finally, critical and reflective thinking should be developed. So every student, this graduate attributes has an assumption, premise that every student is unique. Every student is distinct. And each student has got the characteristics in terms of previous learning experience and levels. Now, in a classroom, there are different types of students. Bright students are there, average students are there, and weak students are there. Three different types of students are there. Each student is different. But we have to involve, and we have to make the students interact. All the three types of students interact, and we have to provide the life experiences. Now, in that case, they will be able to achieve the expected learning outcome. Next. This again, I used to tell the quality, depth, and breadth of learning experiences of the students. In research, we mentioned these 3 points, or even 2 points: breadth and depth. And I used to quote the line from Sivapuranam in Tiruvasakam, that is, Aald Agandra Nunniyane. Aald, depth, Agandra, breadth, Nunniyane, that is again micro. So, if in research this is required, Aald Agandra Nunniya Padipu. So, that should be breadth of knowledge. If you undertake a particular research work, then you must be familiar with the subject as such. Suppose I am choosing a topic from, say, HR, human resources management, then I should be familiar with the HR, breadth of the subject. Then depth, I am choosing one area, for example, morale of the employees. Then I should have depth in that particular specific area, namely morale. So, depth and breadth should be there he must provide to the students. It is not simply what we say, an overall view is not enough. A general view is not enough. So depth is needed. We call it in Tamil as nonipul meidal. That is not enough, because that is not acceptable to the industry or employers. And they include the capabilities which strengthen the abilities for the current knowledge base and skills. Not only that, the graduate attributes help the students to undertake future studies. And they can choose a particular career, and they can play a crucial role in nation building also in future. About this program outcomes or graduate attributes. What are the different things which are expected? After the student finishes his program, he must possess this following. First one, disciplinary knowledge. In other words, knowledge in the concerned subject. Second, problem analysis. If he encounters a problem, how best he is able to solve it. And how he faces it first. Third one, how he is able to arrive at solutions. Then fourth, investigation. Modern tool usage. He must be familiar with the modern tools. And he must become a responsible citizen so that he will become useful to the society. And he must also give importance to the environment and sustainability, because the need of the hour today is sustainable development. Environment, because you can see this COVID-19 pandemic has changed the world order. We are going to achieve new normal. There is going to be some changes because of this COVID-19. For example, there will be diversification of the global manufacturing sector or businesses. That is why China is now intruding into India, because many countries are planning to shift or switch over from China to other countries. One of the other countries is India. So China wants to divert the attention of the people from their inability to retain the industry to this border fight with India. Therefore, diversification of the global business is number one. Number two, climate friendly businesses or environment friendly businesses. All these things are going to be the order of the day. Then ethics. See, the students must have the value education. Ethical and moral values should be taught to them, and they must possess these ethical values. I think in Hidayah College only, I pointed out this particular fact. Suppose if a business has shown increase in say turnover or sales, say from 5 crores to 10 crores, can we call it a success? The managing, the top management may say, yes, we have succeeded, we have achieved tremendous success. But that is not enough. That is only a numerical growth. What you must do is, you must also have done it ethically. If you have done your business ethically and then achieved this large turnover of sales, then it becomes the real success. So ethical way of doing the business. Tata is following this ethics. Several years back, there was an earthquake in Maharashtra, Gujarat, etc., Latur area. And there, many buildings constructions were worst hit, damaged by the earthquake. And government was undertaking all the relief measures, but certain buildings stood the devastating effect of this earthquake. They were not damaged. You will be surprised to note that these buildings were constructed with the Tata iron and steel. So this fact was published. This fact was noticed and published in few newspapers also. Immediately, one executive in the Tata concern, he met the top management and said, "Sir, why don't we encash this particular point? That is, those buildings which were constructed with the Tata iron and steel, they withstood the devastating effect of the earthquake. Why not we encash this?" Immediately, Tata top management said, "No, wrong. It is not ethics. We must not adopt the unethical way. In order to achieve the profit, we should not make use of this bad and agonizing event, namely earthquake." So that is ethics. You must achieve the success, but ethically. In Tamil Nadu also we can quote the Sakti Sugars company. Many sugar factories, they diversified their activity. They even switched over to the spirit manufacturing. Because in sugar factory, the bagasse, the molasses, etc., they are all reused by the spirit industry, brewing industry, spirit. But Shakti Sugars had the policy, never we will enter the brewing business. Even if our molasses or bagasse are sold at a lower value to lower price to other concerns, but we will not undertake this brewing business. That is ethics. So that we can quote number of businesses which follow the ethical way of doing the things, and we must create the graduates with these ethical values, because these people are going to occupy execute this position later in our business concerns. Then individual and teamwork, communication, project management and finance, lifelong learning. Please remember that we must, just like the teachers, the students also should become lifelong learners. Rabindranath Tagore's words you will remember. In order to light a lamp, then we must also light ourselves, just like a candle is melting in order to give light in the room, it is melting. So teacher must also be learning. Teacher must be a learner. Teacher must be a student first. Then only he can become a teacher. So we must create the students as a lifelong learner. Now you can see this is the presentation. The vision mission of the institution should reflect this program educational objective, program outcome. Program outcome is nothing but the graduate attributes. Program outcome is achieved through course outcomes, individual course outcomes. Then, what is the sequence? You can see, you can come from the top to bottom, and for easy understanding, you can go from reverse engineering also. First lesson outcome, then unit outcome, course outcome. Course means the subject outcome, program outcome, finally exit outcome. So this is the outcome sequence. This is the OBE framework. Input from the stakeholders, constituents. It is reflected in the outcomes, vision, mission, which I showed you in the previous slide. Then there shall be course planning and delivery. This is curriculum designing, teaching, and then this is assessment, institutional assessment, program assessment, course assessment. Again, it results continuous improvement through review. This is the OBE framework. This is the OBE framework mapping. This is course, this is program, this is program educational object expected outcome. Now comes assessment. Now there are two methods by which we can assess in the OBE. One is direct methods, the other one is indirect methods. Direct methods depend on examinations, assignment, term paper, project, lab test, quiz, etc. Indirect methods, they require the faculty infer the actual student ability. So the faculty has to observe the student's performance all throughout. The student's ability, knowledge, values, rather than observe their marks alone. For which certain conditions need to be fulfilled. For example, the student's strength should be limited. If it is unwieldy, then we cannot achieve this individual assessment. So this is what I have given you. So in short, outcome-based education is the need of the hour. If at all we want our students to get employment after finishing their programs, then we have to start from redesigning and redefining our curriculum, and we have to change our methodology of teaching, learning, and assessment. And finally, we have to periodically review. If we follow this, definitely this outcome-based education will give the expected results, and we can make our students responsible citizens, because we want to create intellectually sound and socially responsible students for our nation. And I hope the National Education Policy 2019 falls in line with this, because it emphasizes both on school education and the collegiate and university education. And in the school education, it gives it much importance on the functional literacy and numeracy. Functional literacy and numeracy. That is what Avai, our famous poet, Avayar said, Yennum Elithum Kannanathagam. Functional literacy and numeracy. And similarly, in the collegiate and university level, it lays much emphasis on soft skills. That is outcome-based education. So, subject education, education on soft skills, both put together will create better outcomes. So, I hope every one of you would have been benefited by this sharing of experiences. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Now, I would like to interact with you if there are any, anybody seeks any clarification.
I'll check the chat box, sir. Otherwise, I'll ask the participants to interact with you.
Okay. Okay.
Participants, if you have any queries, you can ask sir now.
Madam, question கேக்குறவங்க மியூட் எடுத்து விட்டுட்டு பேசணும்.
Participants, sir, question எதுவும் கேட்கணும்னா either you can write it in the chat box, otherwise mute எடுத்து விட்டுட்டு கேளுங்க sir.
Many people are giving only the feedback as appreciation only. I don't find any questions.
Sir, question please.
Why are we still using the one? There is one question from Senthil Kumar Balan. Why are we still using the traditional education system? Yes. No, it is because of several reasons, sir. As I mentioned earlier, we are in a system which is rather designed already, which is rather rigid. And right from curriculum designing, ending with assessment, our role is very, very limited. Our means the teacher's role. Now, Suppose you are in a particular institution, you know the requirement of the industry, but can you provide the requirement, or can you provide the subjects or the courses which the students need based on the demand of the industry or the demand of the employer? Our role is limited. That is why, after several heated discussions, the National Education Policy wants to change this traditional system by introducing autonomy to the institutions. But there again, every teacher, every institution has to act responsibly, because we cannot act as we like. If your institution offers the degrees, then it should have its own brand name, it should have its own value. So competition will become stiff. And you can see, even some private bodies in Chennai or in Delhi or in Mumbai, they have their own brand value, and the students who come out of this institution get immediate employment. They are only private. Sometimes they might not be attached to any university, affiliated to any university, any recognized body, but still students who do the courses, they get who do the programs in that institute, they get employment. How? It is because of the program outcome, the graduate attributes that they provide. So until then, we have to follow the old system only. That is why we are following. How to deal with psychomotor knowledge, or how to execute a meta knowledge is there. And psychomotor domain, the skill-based education. We have to provide, as I said earlier, knowledge, understanding, application, and skill. So we have to check whether our students have acquired the required knowledge, grasped fully, and they have applied, they are able to apply their knowledge, and finally they are able to develop their skill. So this assessment part should be given. That is why I told you time and again that we have to provide them the practical problems, and we must make them find out solutions. Now you can see the graduate attributes, problem analysis and design and development of solutions, these two things. This type of teaching learning will help them develop their meta knowledge. Now next question is, how shall we align the syllabus for outcome based, or how will it will be scopeful for theoretical subjects while comparing the practical papers? Now I said that more of practice, more of analytical work, which make the students involved, should be introduced, because mere theoretical knowledge alone will not help in future. So this, and for that, again remember, as I said earlier, two things for OBE. First one is clear-cut set of goals. Second one is conditions within the framework. So the conditions must be strict. There shall not be any laxity, there shall not be any lenience on the part of the teachers with respect to the students' assessment. Sometimes you can see, I used to tell my students, because I used to be a little strict in evaluation, and many students would fail. But later they will pass. They will understand the subject. So if I had passed that student would never understand the subject in the proper perspective. And we used to jocularly say, we would pass the student in the examination, but the student will miserably fail in the later life. Therefore, conditions must be strict. Conditions means the system of assessment must be strict. Then Can you suggest some other ways of gaining knowledge apart from meta knowledge? Sir, I tell you that the students have to update their knowledge every day. The student have to keep themselves abreast with the latest developments, for which we, the teachers, have to update our knowledge. Then only we will be able to provide them with the latest information. And the class also will be quite interesting for the students to attend. I used to say the psychological effect which the teacher leaves on the student, which the teacher leaves on the student. It was E.L. Thorndike, an American psychologist, who said, whenever a teacher leaves a classroom, he must have left a pleasing effect on the students, so that the students expect the teacher to come next day to engage the class. Therefore, how the teacher can make this class interesting? Teacher should have adequate subject knowledge. Teacher should have good delivery through good communication skill. Then the teacher should permit the student to interact. And number 4, the teacher personality is important. And number 5, the classroom management should be better. So if all these things, and the teacher should be a role model. I cannot teach ethics I cannot teach moral values to my students unless I am upright, unless I am corrupt free, unless I am clean, unless I am following the ethical values. Therefore, I have to be a model first. I have to change myself. Then you need not even teach the students, but students will follow you automatically. So that way we can, that is why I said we must go beyond the syllabus, sir. Never, a good teacher should not stick on to the syllabus alone. And every day, I don't believe in giving moral or value education as a separate class. That is not needed, sir. What I feel is every day you provide the moral values, for which you be a role model first. You make the students follow that. You be punctual. You engage the class fully for 1 hour. Then you assess the students properly. Do not show any bias, as our late President Dr. Kalam said. Whenever you deal with a student, remember that you are igniting the young mind. Igniting means you are lighting. You are igniting the young mind. So don't be biased. Be impartial with our students. So that way we can enhance our knowledge and students' knowledge also. How can we assess the students by OBE curriculum? No. OBE curriculum first must be designed with all the points which I said. OBE curriculum must be designed first. Then teaching learning must be fine-tuned to suit the curriculum, OBE curriculum. Third, assessment. Assessment should be a continuous process. That is the point. Assessment should not be a one-time assessment. It should be a continuous process. Here we call continuous internal assessment like a test, assignment, or seminar paper presentation, etc. Now I ask you, please touch your heart and tell me whether we do all these things in letter and spirit. No. Seminar papers are not even in postgraduate classes. Seminar papers are not presented in the true spirit. But however, they may write something, they may read out something, and we award the marks because we have to finish the evaluation process. That means we are not following it strictly. So we have to assess the students continuously. Then that's all.
Okay. Any other questions, ma'am? Any other questions? Sir, shall we conclude, sir?
Yes, yes.